Welcome to the Haunted Lore, where we explore the documented hauntings, urban legends, and true crime events that have shaped our collective memory. Today, we're traveling to the humid, moss-draped city of Mobile, Alabama, where the line between the living and the dead has always been remarkably thin. In the heart of this Gulf Coast city lies Magnolia Cemetery, established in 1836 and home to over 80,000 souls. Among its elaborate Victorian monuments and weathered headstones rests a woman whose story has captivated Mobile residents for nearly a century. Her name was Mary Eoline Eilands, but the people of Mobile knew her by a different name entirely: Floating Island. This is not just another ghost story. This is the documented account of a real woman whose unwavering devotion to lost love transformed her into one of Alabama's most enduring legends. Her daily ritual of hope and heartbreak became so embedded in Mobile's cultural identity that her spirit is said to continue that same journey even today. So settle in as we uncover the tragic beauty of Mary Eoline Eilands, a woman whose faithfulness transcended death itself. Who was the real Mary Eoline Eilands? Before we can understand the legend, we must first understand the woman. Mary Eoline Eilands was born in 1854 in Mobile, Alabama, during a time when the city was still recovering from the upheaval of the Civil War. Mobile was a bustling port city where ships arrived daily, carrying goods, dreams, and sometimes heartbreak from across the Gulf of Mexico. The name Floating Island wasn't chosen randomly. It stemmed partly from her surname Eilands, which phonetically suggested islands, but more significantly from her distinctive appearance. Mary was known throughout Mobile for her refusal to modernize her wardrobe. Picture, if you will, a woman gliding through the streets of downtown Mobile in long, flowing black silk skirts that seemed to billow and move as if she were floating rather than walking. Her waist-length hair was always carefully arranged, topped with a small hat tied with a ribbon beneath her chin. To the residents of Mobile, she appeared almost ethereal, as if she existed in a different time entirely. Mary lived at 655 St. Emmanuel Street, in what contemporary accounts described as a deteriorating house. As the years passed and she aged, the house seemed to decay alongside her hope, becoming a physical representation of time's passage and dreams deferred. What promise changed everything? The transformation of Mary Eoline Eilands from an ordinary young woman into Mobile's most famous ghost story began with a promise that would define her entire existence. As a young woman, Mary accepted a marriage proposal from a Confederate veteran whose life was tied to the sea. He promised to marry her upon his return from his next voyage. For a port city like Mobile, such arrangements were common. Men regularly departed for extended periods, and engagements often stretched across these separations. What made this promise different was its ultimate betrayal. The Confederate veteran never returned, leaving Mary to interpret his absence not as abandonment, but as an indefinite delay. This single moment of choice, to wait rather than move forward, would govern the next 83 years of her life. Mary transformed hope into ritual, creating a daily practice that would make her one of Mobile's most recognizable figures and ultimately cement her place in Southern folklore. How did daily devotion become legend? Mary's transformation into Floating Island occurred through the power of visible, unwavering routine. Her daily journey became a three-part ritual that the entire city learned to anticipate. Beginning at her home on St. Emmanuel Street, Mary would first walk to the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception for morning mass. This spiritual preparation seemed to fortify her for the day's true purpose. Despite her regular attendance, she remained antisocial, rarely speaking to fellow parishioners or acknowledging the greetings of passers-by. After Mass, the second phase of her ritual began, the walk to the docks along the Mobile River. Here, Mary would position herself to scan the horizon, searching for any vessel that might carry her lost love back to shore. This vigil could last hours, with Mary standing motionless, her black skirts moving gently in the Gulf breeze. The people of Mobile began structuring their own lives around her predictable appearances. Children would time their morning play to catch glimpses of her floating figure. Dock workers developed a protective respect for her presence, understanding that she represented something sacred in their pragmatic world. Shopkeepers could set their schedules by her movements, knowing that certain streets would be graced by her otherworldly presence at specific times. What elevated Mary's routine from mere habit to legend was its immutable nature. Seasons changed, fashions evolved, the city modernized around her, but Mary's schedule never varied. She existed in a temporal loop, frozen at the moment of her greatest expectation, creating a living monument to hope that refused to die. Why did her appearance captivate Mobile? Mary Eoline Eilands' physical presence transcended mere eccentricity to become something approaching the supernatural. Her deliberate anachronism created a visual paradox that challenged observers' perception of reality itself. The black silk of her skirts served multiple symbolic functions. Beyond representing perpetual mourning, the fabric's interaction with Mobile's humid climate created an almost mystical effect. The heavy silk would catch and hold the Gulf breeze, creating undulating movements that seemed independent of Mary's actual steps. This caused observers to question whether she was truly walking or somehow defying gravity. Her commitment to 1850s styling went beyond simple nostalgia. Every element of her appearance, from the specific cut of her garments to the way she arranged her hair, represented a conscious rejection of temporal progress. While other women embraced the practical reforms of modern dress, Mary's elaborate styling required hours of daily preparation, suggesting a devotion to her image that bordered on the ritualistic. The psychological impact of her appearance was profound. In a rapidly changing world, Mary represented stability taken to an extreme. Her visual consistency across decades created a sense of temporal displacement for observers. People who had seen her as children would encounter her as adults and find her seemingly unchanged, as if she existed outside the normal flow of time. This temporal displacement became part of her legend. Children would grow up, marry, and have children of their own, yet Mary remained visually constant. Her appearance became a measuring stick for the passage of time in Mobile, a living reminder of how much the world had changed while she had remained the same. What happened when hope finally ended? On September 24, 1937, Mary Eoline Eilands died at her home on St. Emmanuel Street at the age of 83. Her death represented the conclusion of one of history's most documented cases of unwavering devotion, but it would prove to be merely the transformation of her story from biography to legend. The Mobile Press Register's obituary described her as a symbol of faithfulness, acknowledging that Mary had transcended her role as an individual to become an embodiment of ideals the community cherished. This wasn't mere journalistic sentiment. It reflected the genuine reverence Mobile residents held for a woman who had demonstrated that some commitments could survive any test of time. Her funeral drew crowds of people who had structured their daily lives around her predictable appearances. Dock workers, shopkeepers, children who had grown into adults, all came to bid farewell to someone who had been both a constant presence and a living reminder of their city's capacity for compassion. They were witnessing the end of an era, the closing of a chapter in Mobile's collective memory. Mary was interred in Magnolia Cemetery's Eilands family plot, positioned between her parents in what seemed like a final restoration of family unity. The cemetery's Victorian monuments and moss-draped oaks provided a fitting resting place for someone who had spent her life honouring the past. Yet, within months of her burial, reports began filtering through Mobile's neighbourhoods that Mary's story had not truly ended. Witnesses claimed to see a familiar figure in flowing black skirts moving along her traditional route, suggesting that death had failed to break the rhythm of her 8-decade vigil. Does her spirit still walk among us? The supernatural phase of Mary Eoline Eilands' story began with startling immediacy after her death. The first witnesses were long-time Mobile residents who had become so accustomed to her daily appearances that they initially dismissed their sightings as imagination or wishful thinking. However, these weren't isolated incidents or cases of grief-induced hallucinations. Multiple witnesses on separate occasions reported encountering a translucent figure that maintained Mary's distinctive characteristics. The apparition appeared to glide rather than walk, with the same ethereal quality that had made her famous during her lifetime. What distinguished these supernatural encounters from typical ghost sightings was their adherence to Mary's established routine. The spirit appeared at consistent times, following her exact route from St. Emmanuel Street to the cathedral and then to the riverfront. This suggested that death had not freed Mary from her self-imposed schedule, but had instead made her eternal commitment visible to those sensitive enough to perceive it. The witnesses described feeling a profound sense of recognition when encountering the apparition. Many reported that the ghost seemed unaware of their presence, completely absorbed in her mission. This focused intensity suggested that Mary's spiritual form retained the same single-minded devotion that had characterized her living years. Some observers noted that the ghostly Mary appeared to be searching more actively than she had in life, as if death had somehow intensified her quest rather than ending it. The spirit seemed to pause at locations where ships might dock, examining each vessel with heightened attention, as if the afterlife had sharpened her ability to detect her lost love's return. How does this legend fit into Southern folklore? The story of Mary Eoline Eilands represents a perfect example of how real people can become embedded in regional folklore, transforming from historical figures into archetypal characters that speak to universal human experiences. Her tale fits into several important traditions within Southern American folklore while maintaining its own unique characteristics. The archetype of the faithful woman who waits for a lost love is found throughout American folklore, from the ballads of Appalachia to the legends of the American Southwest. Mary's story echoes themes found in tales like La Llorona, though without the tragic element of child loss. Instead, her narrative focuses on the devastating power of hope, deferred, and the ways in which love can transcend even death. Southern folklore has always been particularly rich with stories of people who refuse to accept loss, who maintain their vigils beyond the boundaries of reason or life itself. Mary's daily walks to the docks represent a form of secular pilgrimage, a ritualistic acknowledgement of faith that resonates with the deeply religious culture of the American South. The Mobile community's response to Mary during her lifetime also reflects important Southern values. Rather than treating her as mentally ill or socially deviant, the people of Mobile embraced her as a symbol of admirable qualities: faithfulness, devotion, and the kind of romantic idealism that the South has always cherished. She became a living reminder of what the community valued most. Her transformation into a ghost story serves another important function in Southern folklore. It provides a way for communities to preserve and honor their most memorable characters. By continuing to see Mary's spirit, Mobile residents were maintaining a connection to their own history and values, ensuring that the lessons of her life would not be forgotten. What makes Magnolia Cemetery so haunted? Mary Eoline Eilands' ghost story gains additional power from its connection to Magnolia Cemetery, one of Alabama's most haunted locations. Understanding the cemetery's history helps explain why Mary's spirit might be drawn to continue her earthly routine rather than finding peace in death. Established in 1836, Magnolia Cemetery has served as Mobile's primary burial ground for nearly 2 centuries. With over 80,000 burials, it represents a vast repository of human stories, dreams, and tragedies. The cemetery's Victorian-era monuments and elaborate mausoleums create an atmosphere where the boundary between past and present seems particularly thin. The cemetery's haunted reputation extends far beyond Mary's story. It regularly hosts Whispers of Magnolia ghost tours, where visitors can hear about the cemetery's numerous unseen inhabitants. The combination of age, the sheer number of burials, and the emotional weight of the stories contained within its boundaries has created what many consider to be a supernatural hotspot. Mary's burial between her parents in the Eilands family plot connects her to a multi-generational presence in the cemetery. This family connection may provide additional spiritual anchor, binding her not just to her own story, but to the broader narrative of her lineage. The cemetery becomes not just her final resting place, but a launching point for her continued spiritual journey. The elaborate Victorian monuments that characterize Magnolia Cemetery also contribute to its supernatural atmosphere. These memorials were designed to be permanent statements about the deceased, physical manifestations of memory that seem to invite spiritual continuation. In such an environment, Mary's refusal to accept death as an ending seems almost natural. Why do ghost stories endure? The enduring power of Mary Eoline Eilands' story lies not just in its supernatural elements, but in its ability to speak to fundamental human experiences that transcend time and culture. Her tale continues to resonate because it addresses themes that remain relevant to contemporary audiences, even as the specific details of her life become increasingly historical. At its core, Mary's story is about the power of hope and the devastating consequences of love that cannot be fulfilled. These are universal experiences that connect her 19th century tragedy to modern hearts. Anyone who has ever waited for someone who didn't return, who has ever maintained faith in the face of mounting evidence to the contrary, can understand the emotional landscape that Mary inhabited. The story also serves as a meditation on the nature of time and change. Mary's refusal to modernize her appearance or alter her routine represents a form of temporal rebellion, a rejection of the idea that time should heal all wounds or that people should move on from their deepest attachments. In our contemporary world of rapid change and short attention spans, her decades-long constancy seems both admirable and tragic. Mobile's continued embrace of Mary's story reflects the community's desire to maintain connection with its own history and values. In telling and retelling her tale, residents preserve not just her memory, but their own cultural identity. The ghost story becomes a way of keeping alive the qualities that the community most values: faithfulness, devotion, and the kind of romantic idealism that defined an earlier era. The supernatural elements of Mary's story also serve important psychological functions. The idea that her spirit continues its daily vigil provides comfort to those who believe that deep love transcends death. It suggests that devotion of such magnitude cannot simply end, that the universe itself recognizes and preserves the most profound human emotions. Today, Mary Eoline Eilands rests in Magnolia Cemetery between her parents, but her legend continues to walk the streets of Mobile. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, her story serves as a powerful reminder of the capacity of the human heart to hope, to wait, and to remain faithful, even in the face of overwhelming evidence that such faith may be misplaced. The next time you find yourself in Mobile, Alabama, and you catch a glimpse of a figure in flowing black skirts who seems to float rather than walk, remember Mary Eoline Eilands. Remember a woman whose love was so profound that it transcended death itself. whose story continues to inspire and haunt a city that embraced her as one of its own. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the haunted lore of Mobile, Alabama. If you enjoyed this exploration of love that transcends death, be sure to subscribe to the Haunted Lore podcast for more documented hauntings, urban legends, and true crime stories that blur the line between history and mystery. Until next time, keep your eyes open for the spirits that walk among us, and remember, sometimes the most powerful ghost stories are the ones that began with real people and real love. Don't forget to leave us a review and share this episode with fellow lovers of the supernatural. The dead may rest, but their stories live on through us,